Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today my guest is Michael LaMotta from DOWC, Dealer-Owned Warranty Company. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Hey, it's two New Jersey guys had to come all the way to Akron to do an interview.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. Let's dive right in. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience in the car business.
Wow, okay. That's a long one.
Yeah.
I got started in the car business right out of school. And like many, I started part-time job selling cars, needed to make some money. Mm-hmm. And the business quickly sucks you in, for anyone out there who's kind of driven that path. And mine was no different, got an opportunity to get into the F&I office, mm-hmm. which was a funny scenario at the time because it was not planned, but the opportunity came available. I took it, and the typical evolution from there and different management roles. I then had an opportunity to become a car dealer. I took that leap, and it's been an interesting ride ever since.
Cool. Well, what inspired you, to take even a larger leap to go from the dealership world to create DOWC and help dealers control their own wealth?
Well, that was actually a byproduct of what was happening in 2008. I was a car dealer until 2008, and we found it difficult to continue on. We had a collapse happening in the industry. Mm-hmm. You had, GM going bankrupt. You had banks going out of business. And we had received notice from our lender that they were pulling out of the floor plan market entirely in the U.S. Wow. And they had 300 or 400 dealers that got the same letter. And as you might know, floor plans are demand notes, so they can call them pretty much on demand. Mm-hmm. In this case, they gave us 60 days to liquidate our inventory and to exit the relationship. And then at the time, that was a death sentence for the most part. Mm-hmm. The inventory we had was worth 50 cents on the dollar, if that. And our world was kind of crashing for a whole host of other reasons. There was no consumer confidence. You had soaring gas prices. You had no one able to get any kind of credit. So even if we had a buyer, we couldn't get a buyer financed. Mm-hmm. So it was a comedy of different issues that were happening. And, ironically, I had been a car dealer for many years, and I had a reinsurance structure with a larger administrator that I had for a decade at that time. Mm-hmm. And it had a lot of money in it. And I always looked at that reinsurance structure as an annuity, right? I didn't need that cash, and that cash would be there, later on when I was either ready to retire or slow down a bit. Mm-hmm. However, there was a lot of money there, and there was a time when I needed it. And so I reached out to the administrator and I said, hey, there's millions of dollars sitting in this thing. And, that's the difference right now for us going out of business or staying in business. And I need as much of that cash as I can get. And unfortunately, there was very, very little available, not enough to even be noteworthy. Mm-hmm. A few $100,000 of what was at the time $3 or $4 million in premium. And I'd asked them why. And of course, they cited to the various parts of the agreement that governed our access to that capital, mm-hmm. whether it was their UPR percentage or requirement or other provisions that gave them the ability to change or move the goalpost as they see fit, mm-hmm. which essentially eliminates your access to the cash. Long story short, that was our last-ditch effort to try to save the business. We had no access to the money. We sold off what we could. We closed down the stores. And, I moved to Florida shortly thereafter, which had been a dream of my wife's for many years. But, having a few dealerships and being, in close proximity to the stores made it impossible to move. However, once the stores went away, the door was wide open. And so we took that opportunity and we moved to South Florida shortly thereafter. It was that experience that planted the seed to the way we do business now. which I'm sure we'll get more into.
Yeah. Now, where were those stores? Were you in New Jersey then, or?
Yeah, I was in New Jersey. Yes, I was in New Jersey until 2009, early 2010. Moved to Florida. Ironically, when we moved to South Florida, I couldn't escape the confines of a certain administrator down there that's really heavy in the South Florida market. I had an opportunity to acquire a position at that administration company. I wasn't really ready to get back into the car business. I was doing some real estate speculation and investment, and I wasn't really ready to dive back into auto. But the opportunity presented itself, and I took it. I spent a few years working for what is now a competitor of ours, and got the wind back in my sails, so to speak, the entrepreneurial spirit back, and decided to start this company around 2013.
That's a great segue into my next question. I kind of wanted to ask you, tell me what's different about a dealer-owned warranty company. Like how is that different than what you had?
Yeah, great question. So, the prominent structure, over the last, let's say 20 years has been reinsurance, right? You've heard of reinsurance, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Most have. And, a DOWC structure is a lot like reinsurance from the standpoint of they both file the same tax return, which is an 1120 PC. They're both considered insurance companies. One makes an 831B election immediately. The other waits, several years to do it. And so, from a tax standpoint, they're very similar. From a functionality standpoint, they function similarly. Back to the tax point, the problem with reinsurance structures is they have a cap on how much annual premium you can put into the structure while still being able to make an 831B election. And that cap is changing every year with inflation. It's somewhere around 2.6 million now, 2.650. And so, the migration to the DOWC structure just seems to be, evolving with, consolidation, dealer growth, et cetera. So, that structure is going to become more and more the go-to as dealers get larger. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But, that really was the original foundation for us deciding to go put our flag in the ground, specifically with the DOWC structure. But additionally, and probably what drove us to it more, was the control it gives our dealers. When you reinsure, you really don't own the warranty company, right? It's owned by an administration partner or a providing entity, and they agree through a treaty to cede premium to a reinsurance company that you form. But the underlying instruments, the contracts themselves, are controlled and owned by the admin. With a dealer-owned warranty company, the dealer actually owns the warranty company, and that process is similar to the way any administrator would, start up their own business. You have to create those agreements, the consumer PDFs or contracts. You have to get them approved with the state that you're operating in. There's a regulatory process. They have to be in some cases insured, so you need an insurance relationship. And so the process of setting up a DOWC structure is really what provides that ownership. The dealer can control and in some case influence what the contract says, what it covers, how it functions, where the customer can go for service, et cetera. So there's real true ownership there. And ownership gives control, and we're all about control.
Yeah, I mean, you needed control in 2008, and you didn't have it. So that you're delivering that, you're making that, you're delivering that control back to dealers.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we had that control in 2008, we wouldn't be sitting here right now, at least talking about this business.
Yeah.
I would still potentially be a car dealer, right? Because that was a time when I needed that money. There was enough of it to bail us out of the situation we were in, but I had no access to it. And so a very small seed was planted at that exact moment, and I filed that away. And in 2013, I harvested it and built this program completely around dealers, dealer control. The point where you put your interests beyond the interests of your client or your dealer partner is the point you're no longer relevant. And so when we built the program, we looked at every single scenario that might be important to a dealer and tried to build in the control necessary for the dealer to do business the way they want, to have access to the cash and use it when they need it. And ironically, when COVID hit, we had a mini 2008 taking place. It wasn't as catastrophic, right? COVID, from an industry and business standpoint, had a lot of effects, but not as grave as 2008 did. However, we didn't know that at the time. When COVID was first really surging, we were unsure what was happening, and I had dealers tapping into their cash just to make sure they had enough cash on hand to not lay people off, to not furlough and lose people, to keep bills paid, to buy inventory, a whole host of examples that the capital and the cash opened the door to continue doing.
I love your example of you planted that seed away. Let's talk about what that seed has grown into. You recently won your second Diamond Dealer's Choice Award back to back. What goes into that level of dealer satisfaction? I mean, and puts you kind of head and shoulders above.
Yeah, interesting, right? The Dealer Choice Award was a surprise to us. We were a write-in the first year. So if you're familiar with that process, it is a multiple choice process wherein the publication gives a list of potential companies to choose from in a drop-down box in whatever category you're reviewing. And then there's an other field, and you can kind of type in or write in a different answer. And so the first year we won it, we were a complete write-in.
Wow.
We were as surprised as probably they were that we had taken some of the longer-term incumbents in winning that spot. And that said a lot about how the dealers felt about what we were doing for them. I sit here and preach access to capital, control, et cetera. It's not a sales pitch. It's literally the breadth of what we're doing every day. It is, if it isn't something that benefits the dealer, we're just not doing it. And so I think it leads to, a real sense from the dealer community that we actually embody that. And it's not just something that sounds good in an interview or looks good on paper, but we actually live it day in and day out. And when push comes to shove, we act on it.
Well, that's one thing about car people in the car business. They'll work long hours, they'll work really hard, but there's something in all of us, in our industry where we want to have control. We want to control our own destiny. It's part of the reason why almost everybody in the building has some type of a variable income. We all feel like we can push the envelope and we can do better and do more. So I can see why dealers love that.
I've never thought of it that way, but you're 100% right. And the dealer's at the very top of that food chain. And the dealer got there because they controlled how that went, right? They controlled, what their career looked like early on and how it evolved. And so I guess it's in kind because they have control over our program. They have control over how they invest the capital, whether they want to use the money to buy stores. We see a lot of that. Facility or infrastructure investment, whether they want to control investments in equities or bonds. We see a whole host of things. And we give the dealer the opportunity to get creative on how they invest their capital. Because, insurance companies really live only for the capital investment. The automotive insurance companies, meaning, service contract insurance companies, make an underwriting profit. And so when it's all said and done, they've collected a bunch of premium, they've paid a bunch of claims, there is an underwriting profit left over. But a lot of insurance companies, they exist just to collect premium and invest it, And so the auto industry, the service contract business gets to enjoy both. It gets to enjoy investing the capital while it's parked, waiting to pay claims. And they also get to enjoy an underwriting profit after the full claims experience has kind of presented itself and there's some money left over.
Well, we talked about your history. We talked about where you are right now. Let's look forward. Tell me what's coming for DOWC. Where do you see yourself going in the future?
Great question. How much time do we have?
Well, yeah.
A few minutes.
Yeah.
So, the future's something we talk a lot about. And more importantly, we're investing heavily in. And describing the future for DOWC would be a lot like describing the future for any industry right now. Kind of what's on the forefront of every business owner's mind. Any real person who's in control of what happens next has got to be thinking about what we're thinking about, which is technology, right? And everybody talks about technology. It's a kind of a buzzword. What does it really mean? What is the end result of technology, so to speak? Because we believe we're a tech company. We have some of the best reporting and the best dashboards to take what is very complicated and make it very simple for a dealer to understand in a high-tech way, right? Using your phone, your tablet, et cetera. And so from that standpoint of technology, I think we've been there and done that. What's next for us is much more advanced. So we're making significant capital investments on what we refer to as digital F&I and virtual F&I. And if I can explain what those are.
Yeah. Tell us what they are and what makes them different.
Yeah, so digital F&I is essentially a process wherein you would use video to close an F&I transaction. So think of Zoom or Teams meetings, Google Meet potentially, wherein you have a screen share, simulcast style, face-to-face with someone who's not physically in the same place you are. So now take that and wrap a bunch of really pointed technology around it. And what we've developed is a process wherein the F&I manager does not need to be in the dealership. And in fact, the F&I office, we will see an evolution, a change, so to speak, in how that office is used. Today, that office is used where there's an F&I manager on one side of the desk and a husband and wife potentially on the other side, closing a transaction. It involves a lot of paperwork, potentially a menu presentation where they're going over options in connection with their purchase. Then, a signing event where the paperwork gets signed. And I don't think there's a customer out there that enjoys that experience. In fact, a lot of the customer service that we hear complaints about are really directed at the F&I process, whether it's the process of waiting for the F&I manager or, the apprehension of going through that tends to be something customers don't love. So what we've built is a place, a venue, from an e-commerce standpoint, where the customer can either be at home or in the F&I office, but the F&I office has now been converted to a digital space. So imagine two large screens on the wall with a 4K camera, some directional speakers. On the desk is an iPad and an Apple Pencil. And when the customer's ready for delivery, the salesperson brings them into the F&I office, and Johnny, the F&I manager, is already on the screen, face-to-face in a video chat, and he's greeting the customer into the office, and he's asking them to sit down, and he's explaining what's about to unfold. He's able to go through the paperwork digitally. The customer's able to see that paperwork on the monitor. They're able to see it on the iPad. They can have a dialogue about what the paperwork is. Once they're comfortable with the paperwork itself, they can sign it digitally. And that paperwork then gets stored into a digital deal jacket. And the process of signing paperwork continues. And then a menu presentation takes place. The beauty behind the menu presentation happening remotely is, as I mentioned in the example I gave of the F&I office, you have 3 displays, 2 on the wall, 1 on the desk, it gives the F&I manager real estate to present, whether it's digital media, video, brochures. We've created a whiteboard setting where they could mark those brochures up or that content up. They can circle things, they can draw on them, they can highlight, they can explain what the customer's looking at in connection with the presentation itself, right? We've built in a gathering stage where prior to the delivery, the customer's asked a series of questions. They're also asked to provide a copy of their driver's license digitally, insurance information on the trade, and embedded in that questionnaire is a bunch of things we need to know about the customer in order to tailor the experience. And a lot of that's happening through the technology itself. But what I'm describing is a process wherein we're not face-to-face. And why is that important? Well, let's say you take a very large dealer group that has 100 stores. Those 100 stores might be geographically in a bunch of different places. And you might have some stores that are very large, some that are very small. Some stores might sell 60 or 70 cars a month and have one F&I manager. Another store might sell 300 cars a month and have 4. So in that 100-car group, you may have 250 F&I managers. And the problem is the F&I job is a difficult one because often that person's the first one there and the last one to leave.
Yeah.
They can't take a vacation. They can't take a day off. They can't watch Bobby's T-ball game. It's tough to go for doctor's appointments throughout the day, etc., because they have to deliver vehicles. So what if, instead of the traditional process that I just described, what if there was a bullpen of, instead of 250 F&I managers, there was maybe 100 in a central location doing deliveries the way I just described, but in a queue. So now, whether today I've got 120 people in the queue or I've got 85 people in the queue, it really doesn't matter. If Jane is sick and Bobby wants to go see the T-ball game, go ahead, right? You eat what you kill. If you're logged in, you're ready and available to take a delivery. If you're not, you're not. So not only does it make quality of life for that person so much better, but it also delivers a much better experience for the customer, reduces wait time, it increases PVR, product penetration, because it's less confrontational. It allows flexibility for the employees and individuals, but it also gives us a more compliant, streamlined process. And the reason why is because I now have 120 people in one location. I can bring them in for training much easier in groups. I'm video recording and audio recording every delivery. So my ability to look back and really inspect the process and then learn from it, go back to the videotape, so to speak, is very real here. I can control that environment. And so digital F&I is absolutely the future of the F&I office. And in fact, the reason we're seeing income go up is mostly off-site deliveries. And the industry does a terrible job with off-site deliveries. I recently purchased a car from one of our dealers, and I hope he's not watching, wherein, this was a high-end car, and it was for my wife. And she didn't want to go to the dealership. And so they delivered it to us. And at my kitchen counter was a tow truck driver with a fluorescent orange, jacket on, collecting a rather large check and asking me to sign paperwork he knew nothing about. And there was zero presentation of any aftermarket products. I was not offered a service contract. Mind you, I was purchasing the vehicle, not leasing it. And it was the kind of car that I absolutely 100% want a service contract on, because it's not whether it'll break, it's just when, right? And I don't want to deal with it. So there was no presentation. The guy had no idea what I was being asked to sign. And it was that experience that really solidified in my mind what the future of both digital and virtual F&I will be, which is a scenario where the at-home experience, which is a lot like what I just described what happened in the F&I office, where the customer's got a device, I turn your cell phone into a signature pad, and I present the documents, I ask you to sign them, I present a menu, I ask you what you're interested in, and I close the transaction digitally. And then the vehicle's delivered to you. So that's the world of what we envision digital F&I to look like.
You know, I mean, customer. It sounds like the customer is not going to be sitting there waiting an hour and a half on a Saturday to see an F&I manager. An F&I manager gets the freedom to live life and not be there from ding to dong every single day. But it also seems that if you're in Dodge City, Kansas, and there's 3 dealerships there, there's only 3 F&I managers, and so you're really limited on the talent pool that's available to you. And so instead of me needing, I might have 120 good guys across my 100 stores, but that means I have 130 guys that are subpar. And so now I'm letting every deal get touched by an all-star. So it probably will really increase, penetration of products and income.
You know what? Brilliant, right?
Yeah.
You're 100% correct. So not only does it open the talent pool up, because if you're a large dealer group, you could have a few of these F&I centers, right? And you can strategically place them in markets where you have more access to the population you just described, right? And in fact, you and I were having this discussion earlier today. At our headquarters in Parsippany, New Jersey, we are building an overflow F&I center. Mm-hmm. Because in the example I described, where you might have 100 F&I managers in the queue, what if it isn't enough? What if every one of them is in a delivery and now you've got someone waiting to take delivery? What we've designed is a process wherein the sales manager could push those deliveries to our delivery center. Mm-hmm. And we can handle the delivery without the customer having any idea. We either do or do not work at the dealership. We are or are not part of the staff, right? The customer just wants to finalize the paperwork and take their new car, right? Yep. And so it gives flexibility to dealers who might be staffing right on the bubble of what they need in an effort to, save on expenses. Because as you might imagine, what we didn't touch on is if you have 250 F&I managers serving your 100 dealerships, and now you only have 100, think of the payroll savings.
Oh, yeah.
Of 100 highly compensated or 150 highly compensated individuals you no longer need. Or, you can select your most top performing F&I managers to graduate into your, digital F&I, bullpen. And so we think it's going to open a tremendous amount of doors for dealers, and it's going to give them options to evolve beyond even what they thought would be next. And as I mentioned, it's not all we're working on.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you could build a place in South Florida where you could attract all the talent across the entire country. Come to South Florida. Don't pay state taxes. Live in the sunshine all the time. And I'm going to let you touch as many deals as you want. Like who wouldn't sign up for that,
And I'm going to let you take days off, vacations, go to dance recitals, go to t-ball games, because as far as I'm concerned, you're not hurting me if you're there or you're not there, right? If you're in the queue, you're available to make money for yourself. If you're not in the queue, that's on you, right? Yeah. That's not on me. I need coverage, but I've got a partner that also has my back should I run out of individuals in the queue, right? Yeah. Obviously, we'll revisit the metrics and make sure you're properly staffed, and our system and technology is constantly looking at that. Uh-huh. And it's managing and tracking time in the F&I office. There's a dashboard that the sales manager can view to see exactly where each person is in their deal. If they're presenting the menu, the algorithm knows how long it's going to take them to get from the menu to completing the deal. Mm-hmm. And there's a timer built in, and it's showing the sales managers when each person will essentially be ready for their next delivery. Mm-hmm. And that's learning from itself. And it's constantly being updated by what's happening in the F&I office as this unfolds. And that's going to be one of the most powerful tools as far as setting deliveries up and setting time expectations, which is important.
Nice. It's really a lot like, there's a lot of companies out there that will do that with the telephone for dealerships. You have people on site that answer the phone, but when you don't have enough or too many calls, there's an offsite, bullpen basically of people that answer the phone. So it's the same idea. It's just overflow coverage.
You see it often in the BDC, right?
Yeah.
Where you have offsite BDC companies that kind of jump in, whether they're handling lead traffic on the weekend only or they're handling in surged hours. They're available as a resource when your internal BDC's at capacity. So great point.
Cool. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the virtual.
Okay, virtual F&I, right? So a lot like digital F&I,
Yeah.
but in this case, we're using AI and machine learning together to remove the human from the process. Now, machine learning and AI, a lot of buzzwords there, and I'm not going to get into the science. However, what I can tell you is we're building digital humans that are very lifelike, so much so that you don't know you're looking at a virtual human. And, you know, if you follow what's happening in AI, conversational AI is a big buzz right now. The ability for the AI to speak, talk, and look like a human. You're seeing it a lot in video games. The most advanced video games use a lot of this technology. It has not really come to e-commerce fully yet. It's on its way in a big, big way. And we're going to be at the forefront of it. And so what we're working on right now is a way for the AI to take the delivery completely from soup to nuts, using a series of sophisticated embedded software applications like IBM Watson and ChatGPT, and Google has a version. And not only will it take and learn from everything online, but we're feeding it, we are training it, industry-specific information, Q&A. When a customer asks this question, how do I answer it? Specific to our industry. Teaching it how to present a menu, how to present the retail installment contract, taking the retail installment contract and feeding the information, 100% of it, to the AI, so that if you're in a delivery with a customer and the customer wants you to read them the retail installment contract in full, and for any of the F&I managers out there that have had that happen, the first thing you do is roll your eyes. Like, do you really expect me to read this thing, you know, front and back to you? No, here you go, you read it, right?
Yeah.
And the AI is not going to do that. The AI is just going to start reading the document to you, right? It doesn't have, you know, the ability to make the decision. We've programmed it, right? And so we believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, you will see a fundamental shift, not only in F&I, but in sales and in service. We have different divisions working on the sales aspect of it. You know, your traditional internet sale, customer finds you online, starts with a bunch of questions they may have about you, your dealership, the vehicle itself. That back and forth will take place with a digital human. But also in the service department, we're building kiosk machines that are using that same technology to have a conversation with the customer, wherein they can present service, whether it's repair or, you know, open recall information, whatever it might be, either at home or on the service drive, to present the repair order recommendations to the customer, explain why they need new tires and why they need an alignment, and have a conversation with the AI that's fluid, that's human-like. So our first stop on that train is F&I. That's the core of our business, right? And we're going to perfect that, and we're going to give the dealer the option, and the consumer really, whether they want to close their transaction through the digital F&I process, where a human is going back and forth with the customer on a video device, or whether they want to do it virtually, where an AI, a digital human, is handling that transaction, or whether they want to stick to the traditional F&I process, which we recommend not abandoning. You know, we're not displacing, we're just giving options wherein the customer can choose their journey, so to speak.
Yeah. You know where I think that the service writer opportunity is really, really interesting, because every dealership in America is short on technicians. And technicians spend a lot of time not turning wrenches and not fixing cars, because the service writer is really the bottleneck on both ends. The technician has to tell the service writer, and then the service writer has to communicate with the customer. I mean, imagine if every technician put in what their recommendation was, and even you know, the service writer could be in the bathroom, he could be on the phone, he could be doing something else. If that instantly was communicated to the customer, who could instantly communicate back that, yes, I want that done, or no, I don't want that done, now the technician's not taking the car off the lift.
Yeah.
Like, how many more hours are we going to get done in a day by just having, you know, that bottleneck is gone? Because the service writer can only make one phone call at a time.
You know what? Another great point. The service writer has the hardest job in the dealership, period.
Yep.
If you know anything about a car dealership, you know that. As a matter of fact, a lot of our claims analysts are ex-service writers because they just get burned out in the service drive. They get burned out by being yelled at all day long. It's often confrontational. No one wants to spend money repairing their vehicle, period.
Yeah.
If it's under warranty, it's a great experience. If I've got to pull my credit card out, it's not, right? So not only do we see the efficiencies you're referring to, but we see a scenario where there's less confrontation. You're not going to yell and scream at the AI.
Yeah.
You know, the digital human's going to explain your car's got a problem, and this is what it's going to take to fix that problem, and here's how much it costs. And you're not going to scream at the AI. The AI is not going to, you know, have some emotion back at you, which might be interpreted wrong, and set the tone for a bad experience that will wind up on some survey that the customer gets, you know, in the future. You remove all of that. Now, I'm not suggesting, nor am I saying that the service writer is no longer relevant or necessary. I'm saying that customers want a choice. Think about supermarkets. 10 years ago, your only option to check out in a supermarket was to go into the checkout lane and check out with the individual. Mm-hmm. And now you have self-checkout aisles. And in fact, if you stand there and watch, you will see the vast majority of the people checking out prefer the self-checkout. Why is that? Seemingly, it's easier to have the individual, the human, check you out. They're the ones who are putting the groceries from the platform onto the conveyor belt into the bag, taking your credit card, swiping it, or whatever, and checking you out. You have to do all that yourself when it comes to, you know, the self-checkout. Yeah. But yet, many people prefer it. And so we're believers that we'll see a little of the same thing. You will have some people that want to go straight to the virtual kiosk and have a conversation with a digital human, and some people that want to talk, you know, like the old days to a person, you know, want to shake their hand and have a back and forth dialogue.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's kind of like Home Depot and Ace Hardware. Like if I know if I just need something, trash bags, I can go to Home Depot and go right out through the easy self-checkout line. But if I'm working on something else and I'm not sure what I'm doing, you know, I go to Ace Hardware because I want to talk to somebody. So I imagine a service writer's job's a lot like that too. If somebody says, boy, you know, I'm not really sure what's going on, and they want to talk to somebody, the service writer's still going to be needed.
Yeah.
But for an oil change, I don't necessarily need to talk to somebody or wait in line.
Well, you know? And even simple repairs might not need an extensive dialogue. If the customer needs a transmission or an engine repair, that might be a conversation we want to have with an actual human, right? Yeah. There's 1,000 questions there, and we're talking about a large expense. However, if I'm just recommending, you know, tires or wheel alignment, maybe brake replacement, the AI can absolutely handle that, probably better than the human might. Definitely more available in some cases, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see a shift, no matter what. Not only are we going to see that shift in F&I, we're going to see it in sales, and we're going to see it in service. And I'm not sure which one of those departments is going to have the biggest shift. We could sit here and argue all day, right, about where we will see the most impact of AI and technology. And listen, some of this isn't new. There's a lot of people working on similar versions. What we're doing that's different is the conversational digital human. You know, having a lifelike experience, a lifelike conversation with an AI is what you're not seeing right now. That's what you're seeing missing. There's a lot of tech, there's a lot of companies out there that can do a lot of what we just said or some versions of what we said, but not deliver that experience in a lifelike fashion. And that's what we're working on.
So if I'm the customer and I'm taking delivery and I'm working with the AI, let's just say I ask some bonkers question, you know, as people do, you know, I ask some question that the AI has never encountered before. What happens there?
Yeah, another great question. So, you know, we thought through what happens because we're going to see a lot of that. And in fact, the more that we see, the more the machine will learn from it, right? And be able to handle those questions or objections when they hear it again, right? Mm-hmm. But what we've built is a way for the human to be alerted behind a PC somewhere that the AI is struggling. the AI has been asked a question it doesn't have an answer to, and we've got a series of those triggers being built. In some cases, the AI will ask the customer for a second to, research that answer, and that's alerting the human on the other side. The human can now feed the answer to the AI, and the customer has no idea that that's how the answer was given. They think the machine is just absolutely brilliant, which, by the way, it is.
Yeah.
But that particular bonkers question can be answered very specifically because a human's feeding that answer to the AI. And so two things are happening. One, that's adding more and more confidence to the process, from the consumer standpoint, but it's also giving the AI another learning opportunity. And that's going to take place over the next few years, being able to feed that information and let it experience that, learn, put that in its database for the next time it might be asked that question again.
That's interesting. I mean, that's pretty cool. So it would only be a bonkers question the first time. After that, the AI is like, this is easy.
Right, and a response will be immediately available.
Yeah.
And listen, most of the time the questions are going to be on point, right? They're not going to be left field questions. It just might be an on point question that the AI has not heard and that we've not predicted. Because, so you understand the process. We are right now, our programmers and developers are feeding the machine all of that, right? So we're using real life scenarios to determine what will or will not be asked at the time of delivery, at the point of delivery, at certain stages of the delivery. And we're trying to feed that information to the AI ahead of time so that we reduce the amount of times it needs human intervention. But without doubt, there's going to be something we haven't predicted, a question we haven't thought of, and that's a great opportunity for the human, to answer the customer in real time, but then also let the AI learn from it.
Cool. I have one other question that kind of came to mind throughout our conversation. It seems like, like a lot of the car business used to be done by the gut, like, this is how I've always done it, or this is what I think this deal is going to go down this way. If you're centralizing, whether it's digital or virtual, you're going to have access to a ton of data. Do you see a point where different customers are getting a different presentation because we know what they're most likely to buy based upon different of their characteristics?
It's funny, I didn't feed you that question. That's a very pointed question.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest byproducts from this process, right? There's a few distinct advantages that we will deploy using this kind of tech. Number one, to your point, we're tracking data. And we're able to predict what's going to happen by everything that happened before, right?
Yeah.
And the machine's designed to do that. It's designed to learn, inventory that data, and give us the opportunity to interpret it and determine what we do with it. And that's exactly what we're going to do with it. We're going to learn when scenario A comes up in this part of the world with this particular brand, potentially, right? How should we proceed? How should we set our menu up? What products should we offer the customer, right? And what we didn't talk about is a lot of that's happening up front. Like we know that menu creation, and this is not new, F&I managers have been tailoring their menus for decades, right? So what I'm saying is not earth-shattering right now.
Yeah.
But AI's not done this. Not well, anyway. There's some technology out there that's doing some version of what I'm about to say, but not all the way, right? But we know that a cash deal, a lease deal, a finance deal, they're all different. And if I'm presenting a menu, I might want to select products very specific to that transaction type. Right? We know that. We also know that a customer who puts 50% down might not be a candidate for gap protection, right? If they are buying this car to keep forever, we might want to present a service contract with a longer term, right? If they're going to drive very few miles a year, we might want to tailor the service contract in line with their driving habits or their mileage they're going to be putting on the vehicle. And if they drive a lot, we might want a higher mileage service contract, right? All these things F&I managers do intuitively, but they have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So what we're training the AI to do right now is to start with a more tailored, refined menu presentation, to the customer based on everything you learned through the questionnaire. And the questionnaire, by the way, is not like many you've seen where a lot of times the customer kind of sees where it's coming from. You know, they know you're asking me questions that ultimately you might use against me, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. But no, this is part of the process of preparing for the delivery. So there's going to be a lot of information being collected. As I said earlier, you know, driver's license, insurance information, payoff for your trade, etc. We might even execute some of the paperwork during that process. But sprinkled in there will be questions we need to feed the AI to tailor the menu that much, you know, more refined.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as it learns from the objections that it gets or from what it sells, it will strengthen whether or not the menu is created one way or the other and why, and the data will support it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think about a large dealer group with that's doing hundreds and hundreds of deals every single day. I mean, after a 5-year period, that's a lot of data. I mean, you can get a lot of insight, and your point about even the best F&I manager. I mean, when you've got 3 people waiting in the on deck circle, you may not when you're in a rush on a Saturday afternoon and you're the only guy there, you may not be giving your best presentation every time, but the AI is never going to do that. The AI is going to be 100% every single time.
Yeah. We see it often in the industry. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole host of reasons we see it. But, the reason we try to control the amount of deliveries each month to the amount of F&I managers that we employ, the reason we try to control that is to make sure that the F&I process doesn't get fragmented, right? The worst scenario is a scenario where the F&I manager's 3 deep, and you got the desk manager or the sales manager pacing outside the F&I office because the customer's literally steaming. It's a Saturday afternoon and they want to get out of there, right? In fact, some dealerships don't even do deliveries on Saturday for that reason, right? So, the AI will not struggle with that. They'll be able to make a full, comprehensive presentation each and every time. And the truth is, we'll see that advantage in the digital F&I space as well, because, the likelihood of having 3 people backed up in a digital bullpen is probably unlikely because you've got so much more bandwidth there. You've got a bunch of people in one location serving a whole host of stores inside of a group. So, you might have one store that for whatever reason is slow that Saturday, and the other store's just jammed, right?
Yeah.
So everything's going to shift to the store that's jammed because there's a bunch of stores that for whatever reason just don't have delivery set up today. And so we're going to see the advantages of being able to schedule and take our time with deliveries and go through the process fully. We're going to see that advantage in digital F&I and in virtual F&I. And in some cases, it's absolutely critical because what happens when we're rushed? Compliance breaks down. We don't offer all the products that are appropriate to all the customers. So we lose money, we lose opportunity. Customer service goes right out the window. Your surveys blow up because the customer's waiting, and that's the only thing they're going to remember.
Yep.
And now you've, unfortunately, you've starved the customer of a full experience as well. Some of these people are buying $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 cars, and they deserve a world-class experience. And sometimes there are factors that lead to not being able to provide it. And we think both digital F&I and virtual F&I are going to cut through that, not to replace the F&I manager, but to give options, especially under a bottleneck scenario where the customer can pivot to something else.
Michael, this has been a great conversation. We actually talked about solutions to the reasons that you and I both got out of the dealership, employ. 2008, you didn't have access to capital. And when I left the dealership, it had everything to do with hours. I didn't want to work 6 days a week and 1 Sunday a month, from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. And it sounds like with AI and with virtual and digital F&I, there's an opportunity for people to have, a regular work schedule or even better than a regular work schedule. We've kind of covered everything I wanted to chat about today. Is there anything more you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm often asked why, if we're a service contract administrator, why we're focused on some of the things we're focused on.
Yeah.
We touched on the service department today, and we touched on the sales process. We also touched on F&I, right? And really the only appropriate, topic there might have been the F&I department. So why are we focused on, on sales and service? And the answer is, we're partners with the dealer. Mm-hmm. We want to give the dealer control. And we want the dealer to be in control. And what we're seeing right now is an evolution where the dealer's losing control. They're losing control to the Teslas of the world, Carvanas, the OEMs are attacking the dealer. They're doing it in the world of EVs and trying to direct now and control the delivery process on EVs. That's a stepping stone, unfortunately, and dealers need to push back significantly. But no matter where it's coming from, the dealer's losing control. You know, it's difficult for a dealer. I don't remember where in Kansas you referred to before.
Dodge City.
Dodge City, Kansas. It's difficult for that dealer to maybe justify the expense of some of the technology we've been talking about all day today, right?
Yeah.
Can we build that technology and deliver that to the dealer and level the playing field so the dealer has access to the same tools, the same advantages, the same technology these big behemoths do, while still being, you know, a 2 or 3 rooftop dealership in Dodge City, Kansas? And the answer is we want to provide the dealer that control to decide their future, whether they want to do business the old-fashioned way, which we're doing every day.
Yeah.
They want to head towards digital as a solution, which has many forms, or virtual, which is the next frontier. We want to be the partner that's giving those options to the dealer and leveling the playing field.
Great. Well, thank you for coming, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. My guest today was Michael LaMotta from DOWC. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.